screens, it's a plot to drop the IQ. Fighting amongst each other over rumors that don't like you. Prefer us trapped in melancholy with the wood ones of holly. Suggestions that obliterate to camouflage the folly. Attempted mental robbery, executed sloppily. Hypocrisy, this mockery, and walk the talk with me. Put the hands up to touch the Akasha, cause you know deep down there's something bigger than your wallet.
Sweet eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful. Friends, welcome back to Rogue Ways. I am Lindsay Sharman. I am an experiencer, as we're going to talk about today, of many phenomenon, interacting with many entities of various levels of consciousness, an experiencer of many other aspects of what we call mystical experiences and paranormal experiences. I'm a shamanic healer. I'm a shamanic teacher and a spiritual guide, spiritual support system, and my real goal is to empower people to live in their spiritual center and truth more and more, healing as they go, uplifting all of themselves so that they can uplift all of the world. And so if you're here right now listening to this, that's you. And I'm excited that you're here and that you're you. And so if you have watched some of my previous episodes, you've heard some of the darker encounters that I've had. And while those end in light, and there's always some light guidance and connection in those, I've had also plenty of experiences that are mostly light or just sometimes really bizarre and strange. And today I'm just going to share a handful of them that are maybe the most intriguing and make you perhaps consider what this place is and what you are and what you're doing here, as that's what they've done for me primarily. And also for me, they've been a calling into a different way of living, which is from this spiritual center and truth, in which everything I do is motivated by my personal goals of, again, uplifting everyone so they can uplift all of the world, and healing all of myself so that I can heal all of the world. No small task. We're all actually doing that more and more. We just realize that the further we get along the spiritual path and that path to ascendance. And by the way, if you are excited about your own personal ascendance, we can work together one-on-one. You can go to rogueways.org and you can book a session with me. You can read any of the channeled messages that I write at rogueways.substack.com. And you can take the Chakras and Ascendance course here on Gnostic TV, where you will learn the best ways of supercharging and fast tracking your own spiritual ascendance in your own time, on your own level. Everybody is welcome, from advanced to beginner. Doesn't matter. It's accessible to everybody. Very direct, very practical methods of jumping into your spiritual centers and uplifting them on your path to ascendance. So, that's, again, the goal. And so I hope you go and check that class out right now. I hope you go sign up right now at rogueways.substack.com for those channeled messages from the spiritual ancestors, which is the beings that I am in connection with and have been for some time, as you'll learn more about today. And go to rogueways.org to check out all that I offer there and sign up for the email list. So otherwise, let's just jump in. Here's tiny me, tiny Lindsay. I'm probably 3 years old here. Don't know that I had an understanding of anything much. It is interesting, though, that I kind of always did experience some level of edgy, paranormally, psychic-y types of things, even from when I was very young. In fact, one of those things is just that I have a memory from under the age of 1. When I shared this memory with my mother, she said, "You can't remember that." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "You weren't even 1 yet. You were probably 4 or 5 months old." And I said, "Well, I remember." So that even is somewhat abnormal. So I seem to have come in with some, level of awareness or awakening already intact here. And that doesn't mean that my life has been all roses and fantastic. We all have our karma and our struggles and our process. But, over time, I've also understood that every life we lead, because we have multiple lives, every life we lead, we get closer and closer to our goal. And so we talk about old souls. That's a real thing, right? So I came in as an old soul. There's a lot of pictures of me around these ages too, where there's like a general nebulous light around me or orbs around me. So my guides can be seen often in these pictures as well. This one you can just kind of see up to the corner here. There is some something, right? And that's in a lot of those pictures too. So it's not an accident that all of these experiences have happened in my life that you'll hear about here today. It is meant to be that way. There is a reason for it. And as the, somewhat famous saying goes, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Well, my teachers seem to have been around from the earliest moments. I remember when I was probably 4 years old or so, I was playing in the corner of a field. My house was on a farm. We were renting it. It wasn't really ours, but we had lots of field space and I'd love to run around outside. And it was one of my favorite places to be, A, because it was away from the chaos and the trauma of the rest of my life, and B, because nature is always talking, always communicating, it's always responsive. And that was very exciting for me. So when I was probably about 4 or 5, I remember being in a boat we were trying to sell. So it was down in the corner of the field on the road, for sale sign. And unfortunately, we had not covered it. And so it had rained a lot, and the boat was actually filled with water. And I just thought that was so fun. So I put on my galoshes and I was down there splashing around in this boat, just, having fun by myself, as I often did. Again, I was often communicating. I just didn't know it at the time, with other beings, with trees, with animals, with nature in general, with my guides and allies. Some of them that I remember from that time, I still have now. And so I'm splashing around in this boat, and this person just shows up, and they seem very interested in me and wise. And the interesting thing is, even though I have memories, like I said, from before I even turned 1, I can never put a face to this person. I can't even put a specific gender to this person. I just remember so clearly interacting with them. And unlike some of the other things that I didn't realize I was interacting with at the time, this was a physical person, or at least it seemed that way to me. This is an AI image here, but this holding of this book is really interesting because that person did seem very wise, and like it just seemed like they were checking me out and maybe even trying to sort of teach me a few things or guide me on a few paths very subtly. But there was no reason why there should have been a person hanging out there. And I was even at this time somewhat aware of like stranger danger, and I didn't trust a lot of adults. I would hide behind my mom's legs when new people would come over. I was kind of shy, and I didn't get any of that from this person. I felt somewhat comfortable with them. Once whatever the communication was, whatever the instruction was, whatever the sort of feeling of almost being tested was over, they seemed so happy to have met me and interacted with me, and were just like, you're gonna have such a great day or time or whatever. So it was like all of this love and just excitement before they went away. And I remember even at that age, after they were gone, feeling like, what just happened? Like something just happened, and it kind of unnerved me. I kind of was confused. So even though this seems not that dramatic and not that weird, it has never left my mind. I sort of got out of this boat filled with water in the corner of the field and ran up to the house, probably a quarter mile away, and didn't really have anything to report because nothing really happened. But I just remember feeling like, what just happened? Again, it's not negative. Nothing bad happened, but something felt like it was off. And I look back now and I just think that was one of my guides coming more directly and sort of making this contact and making sure that we could make contact, perhaps, making sure that they could come into this level of density that we inhabit here in the third dimension on Earth, or maybe even just checking on me, right? Making sure all my vitals and my mind and everything were intact. It was very interesting. It's a very interesting thing. One of the least dramatic stories I'm telling you today, but just to show you there's been interesting things all along the path. So some of these low key things, and what's interesting to me is when I talk to people a lot of times, most people aren't that cognizant or aware of their own childhood. We seem to just push it further and further back the further we go, or we just have like a narrative we've woven it into that is the smoothest for us, and that's just how it stays, and we don't really examine it deeper. But a lot of times when people do, they'll find experiences with cryptids or with possible guide encounters or more. So even as I'm describing some of these to you, you might be thinking back and going, what about that one thing that always stuck out of my mind or that I forgot happened until I'm thinking about it now? And sometimes that's how it goes for me. I've had so many encounters that sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, there's another one. Totally forgot about that one. So that happens too. You might find it for yourself. And so that was just early, again, 4 or 5 or so. And nothing deeply of note, right? A lot of interesting possible paranormal, possible ghost, possible, nighttime, what some people might call ET encounters. And though that's all sort of woven together with the general chaos and trauma of my life. So some of that can be hard to parse out for me. But the next really distinct and significant experience I had, I was probably 11, I'm going to say. And I was actually with a neighbor and same house actually. Just there's a lot of big farm properties. So, a couple miles away, but when we were kids, that was normal to just ride your bikes all over. And so I'd met this friend and she had horses. And that's a big deal. So I was over at her house as often as I could be. And finally, our parents both agreed we were allowed to ride horses together on our own. It's a huge deal for me. So I got to go riding with her one day, and it was just the biggest deal. And so we get to ride back into these forests, and I grew up in a rural area, so there's just lots of space and not people, right? Just empty nature space. So just gorgeous and beautiful, very lucky. And we're riding, and not that far into the ride, we're back in a forest. We're off of a beaten path. This isn't a known hiking trail or anything. No other people around. There is a little cabin we're sort of coming up on. It's very dilapidated, very old, off to the side. And I mean, if a person's out there not on horseback, they would have had to walk many miles into the woods, again, on not a known path, to be there, which is already kind of weird. And then in this little cabin, no one should be in it. It's, again, you probably danger, right? Like you're going to fall through the floor, that ceiling is going to fall on you. Don't go in here. But out of that cabin, while we're on horseback riding by, a man pops out. And strange enough, I think when you're younger, you're kind of more open to things in a way, because as an adult, I would definitely be like, whoa, danger. Who is this? Why are they just hopping out in the middle of nowhere? Like, what's going on? But as a kid, it was more like, I guess this is supposed to happen, right? Like, what do I know of the world? This is normal for this guy to be popping out of this cabin. Not just that, wearing the nicest suit, the most well-pressed, finely tailored seeming black suit. And now I look back and I think, Men in Black, right? Like, but at the time, that was not something I thought of. I didn't have that verbology. I didn't have those ideas in my head. I didn't have that cultural reference point. So I just thought, wow, that's an awfully nice suit to be wearing out in the middle of the woods, in the middle of nowhere, having just come out of a dilapidated cabin for no reason. And so we just stopped because it's weird. And he just comes up to us as though he was meaning to all along, like he was waiting for us. And he seemed to, and this is where, again, it gets interesting because the memory is very unclear at this point. He holds something up. In my memory, he asks us, have you seen this? I don't know. Is it a picture of a person? Is it a picture of something else? Like, I don't have the clear memory of what he was asking us if we had seen, but something, holding a piece of paper, a document of some kind, have you seen this? And we both just said no. And we were kind of weirded out that he was even asking us, or why, or now I'm sure we're both thinking, like, is this an investigation of some kind? Like, what just happened? Did something happen here? We don't know. Also very clear in my memory, other than the murkiness, that one clear thing is he seemed to smirk at some point. And this is a really interesting tidbit that seems to recur in a lot of my encounters is the beings will, in a way, sort of smirk. And I wonder now if that's not sort of like the wink of like, yeah, that was us. We were here. You don't remember all of it, but here we are. And this is very common, I have found out long since of living life and learning about various encounters that various people have. It's very normal actually to have a murky sort of memory. And lots of people have conjectured that, especially with Men in Black, our memories are being wiped in some way, manipulated in some way. There's some sort of hypnosis going on. Very possible. We were very young. I'm sure it could have been very easy to. Maybe we even saw something more, and that is what he was asking us if we remembered. And when we said no, we don't remember it, that was the smirk of like, haha, we erased your memory. That's very likely, right? I don't know. I just know that then he said, okay. I know he had an earpiece, and this is again, if I'm 11, it's 1993, 1992 or 3. So who had an earpiece in 1990? But I remember that very clearly too. And he just said, okay. And then he walked away, like where we had come from the path, and technically towards the road. But when we had come on, there was no one parked on the road. So where was this guy going? We don't know. The weirdest part to me about this is not even anything I just told you, but that as we rode our horses away from him, we didn't talk about it at all. We're young girls. I have never before that or after that had some sort of encounter that we just don't talk about. I mean, that's what we do. You go, oh, that was weird. Who was that guy? It's exciting almost. You'd want to tell your friends like, oh, a government agent asked us if we had seen a whatever was on that document, right? Like, no, we didn't even acknowledge it. We didn't talk about it at all, and we never did. And I only remembered this encounter again much later when I was learning about paranormal experiences, and someone asked me, have you ever had a Man in Black experience? And I was like, no. And then that popped into my head and I was like, oh my god, actually yes. Yes. And how weird that we never talked about it. And it makes me wonder how many people have had an experience like this, don't remember it at all, and maybe won't remember it ever. Right? Very interesting. So that was when I was about 11 or so. I also had an experience a bit later now. We're fast forwarding now to about, let's say 16, 17. A lot of things are clustered around this age. So again, if you've listened to my previous experiences, a lot of the demonic encounter and poltergeist activity was around this age. And again, life of trauma, severe trauma, and so some drug use has been happening by this age quite a bit and for a while. And I may or may not have been in a period of sobriety because I also had stints of wanting to do better and be better and all of that. So I had some self-improvement aims. And so who knows, but I had some people over. And so I know there was at least like 7 or 8 people over. Generally, if that was happening, I would have at least been, smoking some weed, some marijuana. So that's probably likely. Although, as often as that was, and if you know that particular drug, it's not likely to induce these types of experiences at all. So, but full disclosure for people who are interested. And I went outside to smoke a cigarette, which again, interesting, almost always other people would go. It's a group activity like, hey, let's all go smoke a cigarette. That's a social type of experience. But for some reason, I went outside alone. It was nighttime. Everyone else was inside. Also interesting, and something I never did, instead of sitting on the bench or sitting on the steps or just standing, which I would have often done when I went outside to smoke cigarettes, I laid down on the ground and I looked up into the night sky. And then I got up, cigarette was gone. I went back inside and everyone was freaking out. And they thought, oh my God, Lindsay, where have you been? And I thought they were like practical joke, like they're trying to freak me out. I was like, haha, like right outside. And they were like, no, we looked outside. Where did you go? Where were you? The car was still here. Like, how how did you go? Where were you? And I was like, didn't go anywhere. I was right outside. It's been 5 minutes. And they were like, it has been 2 hours. And I was like, you're lying to me. Why are you doing this to me? And it took them a while to convince me that 2 hours was gone. And I just still, even after they convinced me, I was kind of like, well, that's not even possible. So it didn't, that's not true. Like there's somehow I still, they like, here we were watching this and that's on at this time. And then now it's this and it's, I was like, oh my God, I think 2 hours passed, but also that's not possible. So it didn't happen. I mean, this is like a back and forth I had for a while in my mind. And again, never had heard of the concept of missing time, did not understand that this is associated with not just abduction phenomenon, but fairy encounters from way before we had technology and called things aliens and talked about alien abductions. But if you go back in the literature far enough, this is common with what people called fairy folk, fae folk, and fae encounters, and can be also common in what shamanic healers and teachers from around the world from various traditions will describe as they are taken into their higher sphere as well. So whatever we think of aliens or encounters or whatever, this is actually a phenomenon that is very human and goes back as far as we can tell. But I didn't know that. All I knew was everyone was genuinely scared, and I was kind of scared because I didn't understand how that could have happened. My experience, I went out and smoked a cigarette, which let's just say is 7 minutes. And 2 hours somehow passed, and not a blip, nothing at all did I remember. And again, very interesting that I laid on the ground for some reason in the night, just in the grass. No reason for that. Never did it before, never did it after. Interesting to add that. What does it mean? I don't know. You can decide for yourself if it means anything at all. It did not dissuade me from smoking or looking at the stars in future experiences. It was just another thing to add to the pile of what is life, actually, and what else is going on here aside from the regular day-to-day waking consciousness sort of 9 to 5 experience that we all are aware of. What else is going on? So you add this to the sort of cluster of things that had been happening to me, especially around that time. Definitely a lot was going on at this time. A lot of encounters, a lot of energies, a lot of entities, some good, some bad, some neutral. And this encounter, is it good? Is it bad? I don't know. I will also add that I seem to have had a possible 2 implants after this time. And I, again, didn't have that language, didn't know anything about that, had no understanding of this at all. But I did have something behind my ear that just was there all of a sudden, and I could feel it. And if I touched it, it would move. And nobody seemed to care at all. So I didn't know what to do about it and didn't do anything about it. And I had another interesting place where I felt like something had been inserted or was growing or just felt weird on my shoulder as well. And both of those things disappeared from my body after I had been saved by Jesus or invoked Jesus to save me from my demonic encounter, which you may have heard a few episodes ago. So that's quite interesting that if there were implants, if I had been abducted at this moment of missing time or some other time, and something had been implanted in me that seemingly invoking Jesus' name can rid you of this technology. I still to this day have a, it's not quite like the scoop marks that other people have, but it is an empty space under my skin exactly where one of those was. And the ear thing, there's nothing there to be able to sort of tell, but this space, body workers, massage therapists, doctors, like everyone agrees that's not right. And they also don't know what it is and have never seen it before. So something happened there and then was gone. What was it? What was it? I don't know, but I know that again, this called me further and deeper into my understanding of what was going on here. It called me away from the strictly materialist, sort of atheist track I had been on and into a much deeper acceptance of soul, spirit, consciousness, layers of reality, and more. And this experience gets even weirder. At this moment that I'm going to tell you about, I was closer to 18 at least, so a little bit later on. And I had been interacting with consciousnesses that came through most often as blinking lights, often in the night sky, sometimes in the day, sometimes in other ways, and sometimes as little beings, even, which was probably one of the most uncomfortable ways to interact with them. So they stopped doing that. But I thought I only had the concept to wonder if these were aliens. But it was obvious to me as these lights started to appear to me more and more often that they were interacting with my thoughts, that they were psychic, therefore, and that their consciousness was quite aware of everything I was thinking or feeling. And that was quite terrifying, but I apparently was brave enough to continue interacting with them, and they were continuing to come back again and again. And so almost daily, I would be encountering them, and I started to be able to sort of understand what messages they were bringing or what communications they were bringing. They always understood me. I was learning how to understand them. And so, in a way, it was a bit of psychic training. It was a bit of, ability to sort of see, perceive, or hear with spiritual faculties instead of just the physical. And it was also developing of trust, because sometimes they would seem a little bit too intense to me and I would say, go away. And they would. And they wouldn't come back until I invited them. So I was starting to have that level of experience at this time. And then this experience happened. So again, closer to 18 now, already had a lot of encounters, a lot of paranormal encounters, demonic encounters, angelic encounters, encounters with Jesus, possible abductions, man in black, like a lot of experiences. And now I'm interacting with these light beings that I don't understand, don't really have a name for, and am just winging it. And I'm driving one night, I'm driving a friend home. And again, I live in a very rural place, so our roads don't have street lights. You have your car's headlights and that's it. There's not a lot of house lights because the houses aren't usually up on the road. They're kind of back in the woods. And so pretty dark, winding, foresty roads almost always. And that was just normal. It's just how I grew up. And so driving down the road, and I mean, I don't know, by the time you're about 18, how many hundreds, if not thousands, of cars have you passed at night at various speeds? I mean, there's no reason why. For some reason, a car approached us, and I just thought, oh, I better stop and talk to them, which doesn't make sense at all. But it was such a strong knowing that that's what I needed to do that I started to slow down just in the middle of the road. There's no intersection nearby. I'm not turning. And for no reason at all, seemingly, this car also starts to slow down, which is also not so. Even if an oncoming car was slowing down, you don't slow down. You just assume they're going to turn or whatever, and you keep going. But as I'm slowing down and thinking I should probably talk to this car, which doesn't make sense, they slow down, which doesn't make sense. And we both slow down. And as we get side by side, we stop and we roll down our window. Back in the day, you had to actually crank it, right? So I roll down our window and I look out my window at this car whose window is open and nothing is there. You would be able to see, even if it is dark and there's no overhead lights and there's car lights, there's headlights around, but for some reason there's just nothing. And then I just think, okay, we're done. And I roll my window back up and we start driving. And then again, very similar to the Men in Black experience, very similar to some other experiences, it just sort of hits me. And this time, instead of not talking about it at all, I say, wait, what just happened? And the person I was driving home said, oh, we just stopped to talk to that car. And I said, well, who was it? And they said, I don't know. And I said, you don't remember? And they said, no, I remember, but I don't remember. And I was like, we just stopped and we didn't even say anything, did we? And he said, no, we didn't say anything. And I said, why did we even stop? And he said, I don't know. We were supposed to talk to them. And I was like, well, that's what I thought too, but we didn't talk and no one was there. What just happened? And he was like, I don't know. And I was like, I don't either. And I was like, but really, like what just happened? Nothing. Neither of us had any answers. And we just kind of drove in stunned silence. And I dropped him off, said goodnight, went home. No explanation. I have no explanation. This is very, again, an anomalous, nonsensical almost interaction. I start to piece together, though, over time that something is happening. There's some sort of contact that needs to be made. And this can go all directions. This can be with good entities, neutral entities, bad entities. Some connection has to be made and reinforced in order to continue connection or continue conscious communication or continue on a certain path. Some implants have to be implanted for certain, we'll say, goals to be enacted. Probably not goals that align with my highest choice, or else could do it without implants, in my opinion. And so what else has become obvious, and I've talked about it many times, is we remember things to varying degrees, and often that's not actually a sign of nefarious energy or behavior interaction. Sometimes we don't remember all of everything because we cannot pull it back into this level of being. What's happening is happening at a higher level of consciousness than we are capable of holding in our bodies at this space and time. And sometimes we do actually remember what happened in the moments that we don't remember later once we are capable. And it's very similar to trauma, actually. But this isn't always trauma, or at least not in that way where it's considered to be negative and harmful and hurtful. It really is sometimes really beautiful and amazing. It's just difficult to bring back. Mystics have talked about this for ages. I didn't know that, right? But I know it now. And so I can look back and I can see some of these experiences and say, oh, I may have been receiving transmissions or guidance or healing, right? Or even messages that would stay in my subconscious that would help me in certain trials or tribulations I was about to face, as happens so often otherwise in my life, that I've seen that pattern now so many times that I don't look back at this specific memory and think negative or bad or have fear. I instead look back at it and say, I might have received something really powerful. And even if I didn't, I had beautiful protection that helped me along the way. So it was okay. But very strange, very anomalous, very unexplained otherwise. This one may top all of the rest, though, and it's the one that is the most bizarre. It is the most reality bending, and it's one that I have been asked to tell so many times. You may have heard it in other places as I appear on other people's shows or in my own show as well. And I was, again, probably close to 18. Again, this happened after all the experiences I just shared. At the very least, we can put it there on the timeline. And I had been over on the mainland. Again, I lived in a very rural area, little island. So we had been over in the big city, and we had come back. We have to catch a ferry to our island. So we had come back, and we missed the last ferry. So we had to wait, and we had to get on the first ferry. And well, I think the last ferry is like 2 a.m. and the first ferry is like 4 a.m. But there's a little window there of nothing. And so we had to wait, and we were all so exhausted and tired. And we're finally going to get on this ferry, and we're driving in, and our car is packed. We had picked someone up at the airport earlier, and we had brought everyone we could because we were so excited that they were coming home. So we had like 6 of us in a car, which is never good. So it was just packed in there with all these people, and we're driving, and I'm in this window seat in the back. and we drive onto this boat. If you've been on a ferry, the car deck is often has this window in the boat. There's no glass there. It's just an open hole through the boat. And so when we pulled up, my window seat was right next to that window, so I had a view of the water and the sky. And I looked up, and I saw this very, very bright light in the sky. And I thought, and I even said out loud, that's a really bright light. Because, unless a helicopter had been flying over with like a spotlight, maybe it would have been that bright. But otherwise, it was way too big to be a star, and it was way too bright, and it wasn't flashing or anything. I was like, that's just so weird. What is this really bright light? And as soon as I said that out loud, it actually disappeared. And I thought, that's weird. And then I realized that right next to me, three lights had appeared. And they were right outside of the ferry window, which might be maybe like 2 feet from my face. So pretty close. And there was three lights. And I do not remember which color they were first, but let's just say they were red. And they were just hovering. And the boat kind of moves even when it's pretty stable, and we weren't quite moving yet on the boat, but it kind of like rocks back and forth, and just a little at least. And so I could see that those lights were stationary as the boat moved, right? They weren't moving at all. And that's very strange, and that struck me. And I said, you guys, what are those lights right here? And everybody looked, and no one had an answer. And one person said, it must be the Coast Guard. Which is the funniest answer. When we're in a situation that we can't really conceive of or don't understand, our brain is trying, right? And that was the closest they could come up with, was like, what might be right next to a ferry boat? I guess the Coast Guard. It was the best possible answer, but it definitely wasn't the Coast Guard, as the Coast Guard would have been moving and bobbing too, and there wouldn't be just three perfect lights right in a line, and it didn't quite fit. And I said, I don't think that's the Coast Guard. And then the boat started moving, and the lights moved with us, right? Which is also very strange. Again, if you've ever been on a ferry, or even if you haven't, no boats are supposed to be anywhere near the ferry. No people, no boats, no anything. If there's an animal or anything, if there's a whale or something, like the boat will stop, because it's very dangerous, right? It's a big, heavy boat. It's hard for them to stop. So they try to keep some distance, try to be safe. So nothing should be that close to this boat. And we're moving, and now it's moving with us. And then the lights start to move. Not just with us, but they start to make shapes. And they're doing it in perfect synchronization. And they're moving left, up, down, left, up, down. And they're moving pretty slowly at first, but they're making at first very simple shapes. And I believe the first one was, let's say, a triangle. And I said, I don't think that's the Coast Guard again. And no one said anything, and everyone just stared. And then the lights changed colors. And let's just say they changed to blue. And then they changed also the shape as they changed colors. So now all three are blue, and they're making a square in perfect synchronization. And then they changed to yellow, and now they're making a perfect circle. And then they changed to orange, and now they're making a star shape. And each time they're also getting faster, and no one is saying anything because everyone is transfixed by this absolutely insane light show that for some reason is happening right next to our window. And so we're just watching, and it gets faster, and it changes colors again, and it gets faster. And at some point it is like a blur, but they're clearly making some kind of shape or geometry. And I can't even conceive of the shape anymore, and the colors are changing, and it's faster and faster. And you finally, at some point, think, I can't even see anything move faster than this or create a more intense geometry or shape than this. And like, what could possibly even happen next? It's almost feeling like you're just like moving up to a crescendo, and like something's going to explode. And instead they just stop, and they go back to just white light and just three balls just hanging in the air, moving with the ferry. And then they just dart off into the front, towards the front of the boat. We were sort of towards the back of the boat. And finally, the spell was sort of broken, and I say, "What just happened?" And I jump out of the car and start running up the car lane of the boat because I want to see where they went because I don't understand what's happening, but I'm obviously intrigued. No one else got out of the car. And as I ran forward, I realized I'm just running on a boat. The night's cold, and I'm pretty sure those lights are faster than me, and they're probably gone. And as I'm realizing this, the boat stops. The whole boat stops. Never happened. I've been riding this ferry since I was a child. Maybe it happened once because a whale or a tourist boat somehow got too close. I don't remember the boat ever stopping before though, and it stopped. And because it was dark, it also turned on a spotlight, and the spotlight started moving. And we usually would hear some sort of an announcement, even if something was happening, like, look to your right off the starboard or whatever. There's a whale, there's some orcas. No announcement, just the spotlight, and the boat stopped. Clearly, those lights had gone up, and the boat people who were piloting it, the captains, could only think one thing: there's a person who's somehow stupid enough to be on their boat and darting in front of the ferry. We have to stop, which again means they saw it too. It wasn't just us in our little car. It wasn't just an experience we were having, which sometimes seems like what's happening, but the whole boat saw it. The captain saw it. I don't know if other people saw it. Everyone's so tired, right? It's very early. It was groggy, drinking coffee. I'm sure we're the only ones who are even this young. I don't know who else saw it, but obviously the captain saw it. Obviously the boat reacted to it. The spotlight came on to try to see what is it, what's happening, and never made an announcement, never said anything. And I walked back to the car and I sat down and I said, "What is happening?" And nobody wanted to talk about it. Unlike the time with the Men in Black where we just didn't talk about it. Unlike, with the car, we both stopped where we kind of talked about it but agreed that we have no idea what happened. Nobody would even really acknowledge that anything would happen except the stunned look on their face and the deep feeling of intense fear that filled the car. And the girl who had said that it was the Coast Guard said, "I think it was the Coast Guard." Like she knew it wasn't the Coast Guard, but she had to try to convince herself because the cognitive dissonance is too much, right? And we can actually see this in all sorts of areas of our lives. This is where denial is built, in cognitive dissonance, right? Where we cannot make the idea that we had of ourselves or of the world or of what's going on merge with what we've just experienced or learned, right? Facts or experiences, what other people share or what happens to us cannot make it merge. We can't accept it. And so we reject it and we make up a lie. And this is denial, this is cognitive dissonance. And so it was a heavy cognitive dissonance. It was my first real encounter with like how powerful cognitive dissonance could be. And I didn't understand how much I might be damaging people because I kept pestering them after this. We all went home and I just like sat awake, like, what is life? And what is all these other experiences I'd already had, but this one was like the craziest. And, I don't know. And and again, nobody really wants to address what is this, what's going on. And so each of those people, I would ask them at school, I'd be like, "Remember that?" And they'd be like, change the subject, walk away, like just like not acknowledging it. And finally, the person who said it was the Coast Guard multiple times, I finally like cornered her and was just like, I have to know I'm not crazy and that you guys remember that and that I experienced that and that it really happened. And she looked at me and she grabbed me and she said, okay, yes, it happened. Now never talk to me about it again. And like walked away. And I was like, whoa, whoa. So at least I got my confirmation, hopefully not at too great of a cost to her. And I never did talk to her about it again because I respect that request, because I respect that it's hard psychologically to deal with some of these things. And, people have asked me before, why do you think these things happen to you for, so often and so intensely? And I will share often that Again, because I think my soul has been here so many times and I've, come to this level and I'm here to serve and I'm here to understand who and what we really are and help other people do the same, but also because I can accept it and say, yep, that really happened. That's real. And a lot of other people literally can't. And that's okay. It is totally okay. And now I understood it. What was that? What actually happened? I definitely didn't know then. I understand now. This was actually one of the best experiences I've had, one of the most healing and one of the highest level, I'll say, interventions from my soul family and the spiritual ancestors that I interact with. And so I'm very grateful for it. And maybe some other episode I'll go into greater depth on exactly what that was transferred during that. But at the time, I definitely didn't know. I just was confused. And it doesn't stop. This specific encounter doesn't stop there. So, about, I'm going to say 6 months later, I had moved again over to that mainland area, over to the big city. And it was a new area. I had never been there, hung out there. I'd driven through, right? But I had never spent time there. I didn't know the shops or the places or the locations. And so when I'm somewhere new, I like to walk around a lot and just get like a lay of the land and whatnot. I also didn't have a car, so I'm walking to find the laundromat, walking to find where I'm going to buy groceries, walking. I find there's a library nearby. I'm like, okay, I'll walk to the library, get a little bit more lay of the land and get some books. Library is a good friend of mine. And so I went to this public library, the same library system that I had lived in. It's just across the water. So I already had the library card and everything. I was like, this is perfect. So I went in, again, never been in this library before. And I just got this random idea as I was walking. It actually really excited me. And I was like, since I've never been in this library, I'm just going to walk in, try not to pay attention to what sections are what, just kind of walk and, turn here, turn there, and just end up somewhere and just grab a book. And I'm just going to read that book, no matter what it is. It could be the worst book in the world. I'm just going to encounter it. It's going to be so fun. It's going to be so cool. So I do. I'd like never thought of this before. Right? This was so exciting. I'm going to go do this. So I walk in. I'm like, don't look, just go. I get, and I'm turned and I get into I grab a book and it literally almost feels like it's just like fell off into my hands. Like this was just so meant to be. It's ridiculous. Check it out. It's called something like Mysteries of Time and Space. And I was like, oh, like how perfect is this? Like I'm very, very excited about Mysteries of Time and Space. And I wish I remembered the exact title so that I could have it right now and hold it in my hands. If anyone anywhere knows what book I'm talking about, please, please send it to me. I get this book home. It's pretty cool. It's like a smattering of random paranormal sort of events or psychic events. Or one of the stories was about Bigfoot. One of them was about a man in a motorcycle crash who had, woken up in the hospital, been told he was never going to walk again. But then another different doctor came in and said, you're going to walk again. I'm going to teach you how. And taught him how to visualize the exact places in his spine that had been affected and visualize them healing and knitting back together and growing and just like suffused with light and all of this. Like, pretty weird doctor, right? And eventually he does actually walk. Even before he leaves the hospital, he has made so much progress that his other doctors that told him he would never walk again are just amazed. They're like, how is this possible? It shouldn't be possible. And he says, well, yeah, that other doctor, though, had faith in me and taught me how. And so, you guys should keep him around. And they were like, who? And he was like, oh, the one that looks like this and his name is this. And they were like, well, we don't have a doctor like that. And he's like, shut up. Like, right? Stop messing with me. No, we don't have a doctor like that. And he realizes nobody knows that person and nobody saw that person. And who was that person? Clearly one of his guides come to help him. So that story's in this book. So Bigfoot, the healing, all this stuff. And then I get to a story that is based, I believe it was off the coast of Alaska, but still somewhat similar, Pacific Northwest sort of energy. It was like 1950s, if I remember correctly. A man went out on a boat with his son, and then the story becomes just like a word for word description of what happened to me on that ferry. He looked up in the sky and he saw a very bright light. He thought, that's way too bright of a light. What is that? Then it turned into three lights. It's exactly the same. And as I'm reading it, my blood's chilling, and I'm like, do I even live in a real world, or is this all just like a fantastic simulation or a delusion? How did the exact same thing happen to someone else? The same lights, the same color changes, the same synchronization of movement, the same shapes, all of it exactly the same. But beyond that, how did I go to that book and pull it off a shelf so that I could read this, so that I could know that that exact same thing happened to another person? Things you cannot explain away. Again, your soul, my soul, knows exactly what it's doing. There are no accidents. Everything is exactly aligned with your choices, your intentions, your feelings, your karma. And so that's where you work, right? That's where you focus and create your intention so that you continue along your path of healing and evolution and development of a soul. And every time it gets better and better. So this was one of those moments where I couldn't deny that. I couldn't deny that I'm a soul. I couldn't deny that higher level things are happening. I couldn't deny that I'm here for a reason. I couldn't deny that there is a path for me, because it was so obvious. It was so very affirming, very incredible, and similar to being taken to the center of the universe, in that I just start to develop this faith that you can't create for yourself on purpose. You can't just say, oh, I believe this and that's my faith. This is the faith that comes from knowing that my experience created for me inside of me. It's unbreakable and unshakable. I know that there's higher levels of myself and of other beings that are guiding me, and that life is much more than physical, and nothing could ever take that away from me. So these types of experiences are crucial, actually, in a soul development. So lots of experiences to share, lots of things in general, but one of the things that has continued all throughout these times is that I consistently get to interact with the spiritual ancestors. And these, again, are light beings that come as balls or orbs of light in the sky, often at night. They also appear during the day at sometimes, and sometimes closer in, including within a room, or an area, if you're outside, for example. And so sometimes they're much closer in. Even when they're appearing as lights in the night sky, that's not actually how far away they are. That's just a way to interact, because they do not have physical bodies, and so they can appear any way they like, anytime they like. And this is something that ascended masters can do. And so I've come to understand them. Again, a long time ago, I might have thought they were aliens because they were in the sky often, or flashing in the night often. And I have understood now, the more I've interacted with them in many decades now, that they're, each and every one of them, just a spiritually advanced being, and they're all here for all of humanity's development and support. And again, I've learned since then that this is actually a theme for many people in many traditions, in many mystical traditions and spiritual traditions, that there are ascended masters that are here to support humanity's ascendance. So now it all makes sense. It would have been nice maybe if someone could have been there to sort of help me understand all of that along the way. But at the same time, I'm glad I got to develop it for myself, again, from a knowing within, and not from a book and not from a teacher, right? Because that level of faith is different when it comes from yourself. So I'm very grateful for all of these experiences, and I'll just share a little recap of a more recent experience, circa, let's say, again, 2018 or so. And in this experience, I had ended up at a spiritual fair which I would never have gone to. I would have snubbed my nose at it and walked away and judged it. And yet I found myself in a city that I wasn't used to, with a lot of time to kill and nothing else to do, and no one nearby that I knew. So I, for the first time in my life, looked at Facebook events and found something nearby to me. This spiritual fair was within walking distance and had a lot of opportunity for me to kill a lot of time. So I was like, oh, cool, I'll do it. I mean, I am a very spiritual person. Why not? I just assume a lot of people there are fake, and there's a lot of just junk and trinkets, and that's true. But also there's very real, very high level people there also. So it is a mishmash. So I learned that by going there that day. And when I walked in, I met a man who was not selling books, but had a book sort of on display, sort of like beside him, like in the background, and obviously not meant to be like out front. And I was just attracted to this man in his booth, and I walked over and I saw that book and I said, oh my God, because it shocked me to see it, because I had dreamt of it the night before. And that isn't that weird for me. But it was weird that it was that detailed and that it was that exact book and that here it was. And I said, oh my God. And he heard me say, oh my God. And he said, what? And I said, oh, nothing. It's weird. And he was like, oh no, what? Tell me what? And I was like, that book behind you, I dreamt of it last night. And he said, oh, it's for you. I brought it for you. I was told to bring it for someone, and it's you. And I was like, oh, okay. So I was like, I don't really want to buy this book right now. He's like, no, you just have it. I was like, oh, okay. I would have never read this book anyway. And that was its own message. That was its own thing. But I was also supposed to meet this guy, and he said, come to my talk later. I'm doing a lecture in reflexology. And I said, okay, cool. I have time to kill, and you're cool. Obviously, we have this connection of this book for whatever reason. So I'll come to your lecture. So I went to his lecture, and reflexology is just, acupuncture, acupressure points on your body you can use to heal various different ailments. Very interesting, very practical, very much down my alley. And so I was interested, and a bit into it, 20 minutes in or so, one of the spiritual ancestors came through the wall. And I was used to them, but I wasn't used to them showing up in public. And I kind of was like, are you about to put me on the spot or embarrass me? Or are you not even here for me? Does anyone else here even see this? Because again, everyone's at different levels of perception. And so I'm not sure if they're seeing it or if it's, just me or what. And it comes in, it kind of hovers, and then it moves over towards him, and then it plops into his head, and he sort of shakes, and his whole mannerism changes. And I understand exactly what just happened. I understand Ascended Master just came through and came into him, and he is now literally physically channeling this being. And I don't know if anyone else there understands that. And he said, there is coming a time of trouble, chaos, worldwide, of darkness. And it will start in 2021. And things may become darker and darker as time goes on. But don't fear and don't worry, for no matter how dark things seem, I will be with you all along, and the world will cleanse and return to Christ consciousness at a collective level in 2033. Pop, he came out of his head and flew away. In his Merkaba, which is what we call the light body and vessel in which these consciousnesses can travel, which I call the spiritual ancestors. And he said, after he kind of shook, he said, that wasn't me, that was Sai Baba, who I had never met or known specifically. And so now I know that here we are in this dark time where things may seem chaotic and troublesome, and maybe they will seem worse to us over the coming years, and we will return to Christ consciousness. And I know that because a spiritual ancestor came through and told me that through this man at this event, totally unexpectedly. That was not his presentation. That was not his intention, and that much was clear. And so that was our message from Sai Baba, in which we learn that we're going to be okay, and that we're here to ascend together, and it will be perfect. So if you have had any of these experiences, if you want to have experiences like this, if you want to learn how to become more spiritually aligned within yourself, if you want to hear from your spiritual guides and ancestors, if you want to tap into some tarot and learn about some past lives that you've had or anything else, you can get my soul services and my healing at rogueways.org. You can book a session or schedule a session there. You can also get those channeled messages from the spiritual ancestors at rogueways.substack.com. And I hope you come to my Lightning Oracle Tuesdays, which usually happen on the 1st and the 3rd Tuesday of every month at 9 p.m. Eastern. We do a Zoom call and you get a specific message from your spiritual guides and allies for you. I hope you come to those. It is always really powerful. It's a healing event in itself, aside from the messages you get to receive. And that's what's really important and beautiful. So I'm so grateful again to be here with you. Thank you for being here and being you. This is one of the best times in history. And we're about to see some of the most massive transformations in consciousness that we've ever seen. And never fear, as Sai Baba said, your spiritual ancestors, your ascended masters, your spiritual guides and allies are here with you all along, and it is perfect. So until you know it, travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first. Mwah.
Yeah, come on, Rat Kings, baby. It's the rap machine. Yeah, check it. Gray bearded pirate. My motherfucker unknown. Yeah, come on. In the place with my fist up, meaning I resist the bullshit that they feed us and lead us. This is just a part of the process, man. Just watch this, cause this shit's about to get crazy like a mosh pit. We lost it, toss it, let's start it again. Cause now with technology, with smarter men and women, this is the beginning, not the end. And this is the message of hope that I send. Look on your TV, it's a culture of death. They'll keep on lying to the very last breath. We keep on striving and spreading the truth. It's hard to survive in this world for the youth. The door is closed, the old world is dead. Let's have an age of understanding instead. I'll include you and you include me. Let's see what we can build with some positivity. Let's go, you're moving too slow. Let me see your hands if you know what I know. Come on.
Rap like mummy, ain't no dummy in my rhyming. Started flowing freestyle and now they rhyming loud silence. On with the violence, bodies piling with the gray-bearded pirate. On your TV in 4K 3D virtual reality. Casualty of urban warfare. I know but I'm not scared, just prepared and aware. Shining my light through the tunnel of hope. Into the rope, but I'ma give it one more pull. Till the family is full. Take the bull by the horns and lead it to the slaughter. That would be harder and you would be softer. Sometimes I'm a monster, and you forever imposter, which is champagne and lobster. This royalty, the way it was supposed to be. Hopefully the new door opens and the old one closes, with way more focus and growth to mold us, and the truth that they should have told us.
To them screens, it's a plot to drop the IQ. Fighting amongst each other over rumors that don't like you. Prefer us trapped in melancholy with the wood wands of holly. Suggestions that obliterate to camouflage the folly. Attempted mental robbery, executed sloppily. The paupers see this mockery and walk the talk with me. Put the hands up to touch the Akasha, cause you know deep down there's something bigger than your wallet. Everyone got a gift, everyone got a light. They want you to forget that ish, cause they can't dim the bright. The positive vibration takes you past the sign shackles, from the sewers and the alleys in the moving castles. Who these assholes really serving with an exposed Achilles surgeon around the corner lurking to prove ascension trumps perversion? Learn them to catch fish and unplug the signal. Show them the simpletons now build the fucking temples.